So, good morning, everyone. So, my name is Arafat, and I teach history on the textbook platform. So, let us continue with our discussion from where we left in our previous class. So, we in fact started discussing. This is basically a continuation of the NCERT series. So, we started discussing the 8th standard NCERT, the 8th standard history NCERT we started discussing, and this is the third class in the NCERT lecture. That is, this is the third lecture of the NCERT series. So in the last class we have discussed how the decline of the Mughal Empire happened, and we have also discussed how the British became Sri Lakshmi. I will be providing the same today. Fine. Today I will definitely provide. So let me continue. So I just discussed with you the developments that happened in India till 1750. I told you that development number one was the disintegration of the Mughal Empire. This is development number one that happened till 1750. Development number two is that the British, which was one of the various, one of the many European companies to operate in India, successfully defeated its European rivals and emerged as a dominant, a powerful trading company in India. These were the developments which we discussed in the previous class. Take a look at this map once again. So basically, this map clearly shows the various kingdoms that came into India by about 1750. So two developments that happened till 1750 is one, disintegration of the Mughal Empire. Second important development happened to be British, which happened to be one of the five European trading companies operating in India, successfully defeated the remaining European competitors and emerged as a dominant power, a dominant economic power in India, a trading company in India. So the East India Company, or the English East India Company, used the money power which it had to go for the territorial conquest of India. Up to point. So now let us in this class discuss. So in the previous class we have discussed the Faruq Siyar's farman as well. I told you that this farman happened to be a very important event in the history of India. So I told you that it was after the Faruq Siyar's farman that it is after the Faruq Siyar's farman that there was a many-fold increase in the profits of the East India Company. It was as a result of this farman, the East India Company's revenues increased by many times. It became a very profit. It became a very rich company, and the company used the same resources to hire large number of troops, that is army, and use the army to go for the territorial conquest of India. This is what we have discussed in our previous class. Now let us continue with our discussion. So basically, the British conquest of India began with the British conquest of India began in the year 1757, and the British conquest of India ended in 1856. 1856. So the British conquest of India proceeded exactly for about 100-year time period. Got my point? So the first territory, take a look at this map of India once again. So these were the various kingdoms. You just take a look at this. Bengal happened to be one of the very rich province of India. So Marathas centrally located, then Hyderabad. So these were different kingdoms that emerged in India by 1750 AD. Now come to the point. So the British conquest of India began in the year 1757 and it ended in 1856. So the British conquest of India proceeded exactly for about 100-year period. The British conquest of India began with it began with Bengal and it ended with Awadh. So the first territory to be conquered by the British happened to be Bengal. That was in the year 1757. And the last kingdom to be conquered by the British in India happened to be Awadh. Awadh kingdom, this was the kingdom. This is basically the Awadh kingdom. This is the Awadh kingdom. Up to point. So during this 100-year period, that is between 1757 to 1856, the British conquered about 500 kingdoms, not one and two. It conquered for about the British during this 100-year period between 1757 to 1856 conquered roughly 500 kingdoms. And by conquering these 500 kingdoms, it brought the territory of these 500 kingdoms under its direct control. So that part of India that came under the direct control of the British came to be referred to as British India, whereas another 500 plus kingdoms continued to be under the control of various rulers. So the British during this 100-year period conquered roughly 500 kingdoms, but 500 plus kingdoms still continued to remain under the control of various rulers, and these 500 plus kingdoms came to be referred to as the princely states. The princely states. That's the point. Let me repeat this point once again for you. So after the death of Aurangzeb in 1707, the disintegration of the Mughal Empire began, and within a short span of time, not less than 1,000 kingdoms came into existence in the Indian subcontinent. So basically, Mughals ruled over the entire Indian subcontinent, but after the death of Aurangzeb, the disintegration of the Mughal Empire began, and within a short span of time, close to 1,000 kingdoms came into existence within the Indian subcontinent. Of these 1,000 kingdoms, the British conquered roughly 500 kingdoms. And that part of India that came under the direct control of British is referred to as British India, whereas of these 1,000 kingdoms, 500 still continued to be under the control of different rulers. So those territories which were under the control of the native rulers of India began to be referred to as the princely states. So in today's topic, let us understand how the British went about conquering different territories of India and what policies the British followed during their rule. These two aspects will be discussed in today's class. I hope I am clear. So let me repeat. In today's class, we will be discussing how the British went about conquering different parts of India. That will be addressed. Second, the various policies which the British followed to establish their control over India will also be discussed in today's class. So I told you the first territory to be conquered by the British happened to be Bengal. How did this British conquest of Bengal proceeded? Let us discuss that point. So basically in 1756, the ruler of Bengal was one Mr. Siraj-ud-Daulah. So I told you in 1717 itself, Bengal became an independent kingdom. But in 1756, the ruler of Bengal was one Mr. Siraj-ud-Daulah. So it was during Siraj-ud-Daulah's period that conflict broke out with the British. But what are the reasons? What was the reasons for conflict between Siraj and the British? Let us take a look at reasons. One is the issue of fortification. The fortification issue. I told you the Britishers and other European trading companies usually fortified their settlements. they fortified their settlements. That's the point. Say, for example, these Europeans were basically the trading companies, and therefore these trading companies constructed warehouses. Since they were into trade, they constructed warehouses. So these trading companies were storing the goods which they procured for trade in all of these warehouses. They were basically using the warehouses to store the goods which these companies procured for trade. And as time passed by, the Europeans also began to construct their offices close to that of these warehouses. These Europeans also began constructing their houses close to that of these warehouses. So warehouses were constructed by the European companies. Close to that of those warehouses, the offices were also constructed, and also the houses of these Europeans were also constructed close to that of those warehouses. And this entire settlement, this entire area later began to be fortified. That is, large sized walls began to be constructed surrounding this entire region. So in other words, within the fortified area were located warehouses, offices, and houses belonging to these European trading companies. This is what happened at a point. So the whole point is, Siraj-ud-Dawla ordered the European trading companies operating in Bengal to destroy their forts. Basically, Siraj-ud-Dawla ordered the European trading companies operating in Bengal to stop fortification of their settlements. Siraj-ud-Dawla promised full protection to all the European trading companies operating within Bengal. Siraj-ud-Dawla promised full protection, but at the same time, Siraj-ud-Dawla demanded that trading companies operating in Bengal should immediately stop fortification. That's the point. So the other European trading companies operating in Bengal accepted this order, but not the British. British basically refused to implement the order passed by Siraj-ud-Dawla. So they refused to stop their fortification. This became reason number one for the outbreak of a conflict between Siraj and the British. Second reason, misuse of the custom-free trade. I already told you, in the previous class, if you remember, we discussed the Faruq Siyar's farman. Got my point. So under the Faruq Siyar, basically Faruq Siyar is a later Mughal ruler, and in 1717, I told you, he issued a farman or a royal order, which is popularly called the Faruq Siyar's farman. So under the Faruq Siyar's farman, the British were allowed to carry out custom-free trade in all parts of India by paying 10,000 rupees annually to the British, to the Mughals. The British were allowed to carry out custom-free trade in all parts of India, including in Bengal, by paying 10,000 rupees annually to the Mughals. And this order they received in 1717 itself. But the point is, the British started misusing this custom-free trade. That's the point. So custom-free trade was legally available to the British, but the British started misusing this custom-free trade. How? Basically, the custom-free trade is not applicable to the custom-free trade only covers the official trade of the East India Company, but not the private trade carried out by the employees of the East India Company. Let me repeat this point once again for you. What is this custom-free trade? Under the Faruq Siyar's Farman 1717, only the trade of the East India Company was allowed to be carried out without paying any kind of taxes. So the point is, only the East India Company was exempted from the customs duties. The employees of the East India Company who were also carrying out their private trade were not covered under the Faruq Siyar's farman. For your simple understanding, this being just an 8th standard NCERT, without going into the details, let me explain this one in a different manner. So basically, the British, in simple terms, the British started misusing their power, misusing the custom free trade. Got the point? So basically, they when when the British started misusing their custom free trade, the rulers of Bengal, they began to suffer revenue loss. It was a revenue loss to the rulers of Bengal, that is Sirajuddaula, and therefore Sirajuddaula refused to recognize the custom free trade being carried out by the British. Basically, Sirajuddaula objected to the custom free trade being carried out by the British. That became reason number 2 for the outbreak of a conflict between Siraj and the British. And third, the British in fact began interfering in the internal political matters of Bengal. Basically, Sirajuddaula was the ruler of Bengal in 1756, but in Bengal there was a rival contender to the throne of Bengal. Got my point? So the point is, Siraj was the ruler, but in Bengal there was a rival contender to the throne. The cousin of Sirajuddaula was in fact a rival contender to the throne of Bengal. So the British, in a way, began encouraging the cousin of Sirajuddaula to lay claims to the throne of Bengal. In other words, the British, in a way, started instigating the cousin of Sirajuddaula to lay claims to the throne of Bengal. So in other words, the British started interfering in the internal political matters of Bengal. And these three became reasons for the outbreak of a conflict between Siraj and the British. And this conflict eventually led to a war known as the Battle of Plassey. So the point is, I'm trying to explain how the British went about conquering different territories of India. I told you the first territory to be conquered by the British happened to be Bengal. And the ruler of Bengal in 1756 was one Mr. Siraj. I told you the reason why the conflict between Siraj and British broke out. These are basically the 3 reasons. 1, 2 and 3 reasons. That's the point. Because of these conflicts, eventually it resulted in a war known as the Battle of Plassey. Plassey, the actual name of Plassey is Palashi. Palashi in Bengal, but anglicized name of Palashi is Plassey. And this war was fought on 23rd June 1757. That's the point. So this war was fought between the British and Sirajuddaula. In this war, Sirajuddaula was not only defeated but also got killed in the battlefield. So basically, in this battle, that is the Battle of Plassey, Sirajuddaula was not just defeated, he was also killed in the battlefield. But why did Siraj got defeated? The point is, the British won the Battle of Plassey through treachery. The British won the Battle of Plassey through treachery. So before the beginning of the war, before the war actually began, the British entered into a secret arrangement with the officers of Sirajuddaula. Before the beginning of the war on 23rd June 1757, the British entered into a secret arrangement with the officers of Sirajuddaula. That point. One such officer of Siraj was one Mr. Mir Zafar. Mir Zafar was no ordinary officer. He was in fact the commander of the army. In other words, he was the Senapati. He was the commander of the army. So the British entered into a secret understanding with Mir Zafar, So according to that understanding, Mir Jafar should help the British in defeating Sirajud-Dowla. That was the agreement. So basically, the British, before the beginning of Battle of Plassey, entered into a secret understanding with the Mir Jafar, the officer of Siraj. According to this understanding, Mir Jafar shall help the British in defeating Siraj, and in return, the British promised to make Mir Jafar the next ruler of the Bengal kingdom. Got the point? The British, in return, agreed to make Mir Jafar as the next ruler of a Bengal kingdom. So this was an arrangement, a secret arrangement between Mir Jafar and the British. So therefore, when the battle actually began on 23rd June 1757, the troops under the command of Mir Jafar did not participate in the war. The troops under the command of Mir Jafar did not actually participate in the war. And as a result, so Sirajud-Dowla was easily defeated by the British. So basically, the British won the Battle of Plassey through treachery. Got the point? This is actually what happened on 23rd June 1757. So, but the point is, the British, though the British won the Battle of Plassey, the British did not occupy Bengal. The British did not occupy Bengal. Even at this stage, that is, even after the Battle of Plassey, the British were mostly interested in carrying trade and commerce. The main aim of the British, even in 1757, was to carry out trade without any restrictions and make enough money. That was their objective. So therefore, even after the Battle of Plassey, the British did not occupy Bengal. In fact, the British ruled Bengal through their puppet rulers till 1772. So Battle of Plassey happened in 1757, but the British finally, they occupied Bengal only in the year 1772. So in other words, between 1757 to 1772, that is for about 15-year period, the British ruled Bengal indirectly. The British ruled Bengal through their puppet rulers. Got the point? So they ruled Bengal through those rulers who more or less acted according to the whims and fancies of the British. That's the point. So this is what happened in Battle of Plassey, and this is what happened. So basically, it occupied Bengal only in the year 1772. Let us take a look at what happened in Bengal. So basically, as per the agreement that was reached before the Battle of Plassey, as per the agreement, Mir Jafar was appointed as the ruler of Bengal. And Mir Jafar was the ruler of Bengal between 1757 to 1760. That's the point. 1757 to 1760, Mir Jafar remained the ruler of Bengal. But then afterwards, conflicts broke out between Mir Jafar and the British. And therefore, in 1760, the British removed Mir Jafar from the throne. The British removed Mir Jafar as the ruler of Bengal and replaced him with Mir Qasim. So between 1760 to 1764, Mir Qasim was allowed to become, he was basically the ruler of Bengal. Let me repeat this point once again. As per the agreement, Mir Jafar was made the ruler of Bengal and he remained the ruler of Bengal till 1760. But then afterwards, disputes broke out between the British and Jafar, and therefore the British removed Jafar from the throne and replaced him with Mir Qasim. And Mir Qasim remained the ruler of Bengal between 1760 to 64 for about 4 years. But in 1764, conflicts broke out between Qasim and the British, and therefore the British once again removed Qasim from the throne. The British removed Qasim from the throne and once again replaced Mir Jafar as the ruler of Bengal. So basically in 1764, Mir Jafar was once again brought back as the ruler of Bengal. So the whole point which I'm trying to convey is the British, though they won the Battle of Plassey in 1757, they completely occupied Bengal only in the year 1772. Till 1772, that is between 1757 to 1772, they ruled Bengal indirectly. They ruled Bengal through their puppet rulers. Puppet ruler number 1 is Mir Jafar. Then second puppet ruler is Mir Qasim. So when those puppet rulers tried to rule independently, immediately they were removed from the throne and replaced by individuals who are more amiable to the British. At the point, this is what happened. So finally, in 1765, the British received the Diwani of Bengal. In 1765, so I just discussed with you, I am now discussing with you the events that unfolded after the Battle of Plassey. So event number 1 that unfolded is the British began frequently changing the rulers of Bengal according to their choice. This is the event number 1 that unfolded immediately after the Battle of Plassey. This is the event number 2, the Diwani of Bengal. So in 1765, the British got the Diwani of Bengal. Diwani, in other words, refers to the revenue administration. The revenue administration. So basically, in 1765, the British classified administration into 2 types. They divided the Bengal administration into 2 parts. One is the revenue administration, and the second is the law and order administration. So in 1765, the British took over the revenue administration. The revenue administration is also referred to as Diwani administration. Diwani means revenue administration. Got the point? Nizamat means the law and order administration. Nizamat means the law and order administration. So basically, the British took over the revenue administration or the Diwani administration, whereas the law and order administration, in other words, the Nizamat administration, was left to be administered by the ruler of Bengal. It was left to be administered by the ruler of Bengal, whereas the Diwani administration was taken over by the British. So what is the implication? Diwani administration was basically involved in revenue collection. Diwani administration was basically involved in revenue collection. It means that it was collecting taxes directly from the people. So in other words, from 1765 AD onwards, the British in fact became the revenue collector from Bengal. From 1765 AD onwards, the British in fact became the revenue collector from Bengal. And this has serious implications, mind you. The point is, you must understand the nature of East India Company. East India Company was basically a trading company. East India Company was basically a trading company. East India Company came to India to carry out a trade, and East India Company purchased goods from the Indians and sold the same in the European markets. That's the point. And to purchase goods from the Indians, the British brought either gold or silver. The British came with gold or silver coins, used them to purchase goods from the Indians, like say cotton textiles, silk textiles, spices, etc., and sold the same in the European markets. So that is how the East India Company made profits. But from 1765 AD onwards, the inflow of gold and silver to India from England stopped. From 1765 AD onwards, the inflow of gold and silver from England into India stopped once for all. Why? Because the point is, in 1765, the East India Company became the revenue collector of Bengal, the revenue collector from Bengal, The East India Company in a way started using the same money to procure goods from the Indians. So till 1765, the British brought money into India, gold and silver coins. But from 1765 AD onwards, it all stopped. It all happened because the British in 1765 took over the revenue administration of Bengal. So the ruler of Bengal was left to carry out the law and order administration, whereas the revenue collection task in Bengal was taken over by the British. And in the capacity of the revenue collector, the British began collecting taxes from the people, from the peasants of Bengal, and used the same money to purchase goods from the Indians, which it began selling in the European markets. So this Diwani of Bengal, the period of Diwani of Bengal is 1765 to 1772. The point is, the period of Diwani of Bengal is 1765 to 1772. So it was a terrible period in the history of Bengal. The period between 1765 to 1772 is in fact a very, very terrible period in the history of Bengal. This was because the British were interested in only collecting land revenue from the people of Bengal, but they did nothing for the welfare of the people of Bengal. They did nothing. They were interested only in collecting land revenue. They did nothing to provide any kind of welfare facilities or welfare, they did not do any kind of, did not carry out any kind of welfare activities for the benefit of the people of Bengal. This is what happened. So as a result, what happened? In 1770, a major famine broke out in Bengal. So in usual course, famines are not new to India. Famines have been occurring in India since ancient times. But whenever famines occurred, the rulers at least carried out some relief measures. The rulers did carry out some relief measures. But the point is, in 1770, a major famine broke out in Bengal. But this time, the British did not carry out any kind of relief activities. Because the British, they were merely interested in collecting land revenue. They did nothing for the welfare of the people. The ruler of Bengal, on the other hand, had no access to resources. He was basically involved only in law and order administration. Even if the ruler of Bengal wanted to carry out relief activities, he was not able to do because he did not have any source of income. The source of income was with the British. The British were not interested in any welfare activities. So therefore, when this famine broke out in Bengal in 1770, the British did not carry out any kind of relief activities. As a result, close to 1/3 population of Bengal got killed in this terrible famine of 1770. Close to 1/3 population of Bengal got killed in this terrible famine of 1770. This is what actually happened. That's the point. So the point is, the British realized that what they have done is completely wrong. So therefore, in 1772, the point is, by 1772, the British felt even more emboldened. And in 1772, the British even took over the law and order administration from the ruler of Bengal. And that's how in 1772, the British finally emerged as the political master of Bengal. So the point is, in 1757 itself, the Battle of Plassey was over, in which the British emerged victorious. But till 1772, the British did not occupy Bengal. They tried to rule Bengal indirectly, but by 1772, they felt emboldened. They now had the confidence that they can carry out administration on their own. And therefore, in 1772, they went ahead and took over even the law and order administration from the ruler of Bengal. So it was in 1772 that the British finally got transformed from a trading entity to an administrative power. So it was in 1772 the British finally got transformed from merely a trading entity to a territorial power or an administrative power. And that's how began the British rule in India in 1772 AD. And as time passed by, the British went about occupying different territories of India. So I just told you complete annexation of Bengal in 1772 AD. And as time passed by, the British went on to occupy different territories of India. I just told you the British conquest of India was seen between 1757 to 1856. During this time period, the British conquered roughly 500 plus kingdoms. Got my point? So the first territory to be occupied by the British happened to be Bengal. Got my point? And thereafterwards, the British went on to occupy the other territories of India. Say, for example, Mysore was an independent kingdom. So Mysore in the 18th century AD was under the control of Hyder Ali and his son by name Tipu Sultan. So basically in 18th century AD, Mysore was being ruled by, it was under the control of Hyder Ali, and after the death of Hyder Ali, Tipu Sultan became the ruler. So the rulers of Mysore, both Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, were highly independent rulers. They were highly independent rulers. And moreover, Tipu Sultan was a very, very ambitious man. He tried expanding his kingdom in all directions. The British felt threatened, and therefore the British declared wars on the Mysore kingdom. Let me repeat. So, of all the native dynasties of India, Mysore, or the rulers of Mysore, were very ambitious. They wanted to make Mysore as a powerful kingdom, and the British immediately began to feel threatened, and therefore the British declared they fought 4 wars against the Mysore rulers. It was in the fourth war, the ruler of Mysore, that is Tipu Sultan, was defeated and killed. Thereafterwards, the entire territory of the Mysore kingdom was annexed to the British territories. Take a look at this map. How did this proceed? How did this British conquest of India proceed? So basically, the British conquest of India proceeded with the conquest of Bengal in 1772, and thereafterwards you come to this Mysore kingdom. This is Mysore. So Mysore was under the control of Tipu Sultan. I just told you he was a very, very ambitious ruler. He tried expanding his kingdom in all directions, but the British felt threatened because British had numerous settlements in Kerala. So the British had numerous settlements in Kerala. So from these settlements, the British carried out trade with other parts of the world. So therefore, the British felt threatened, and therefore they declared war against the Mysore rulers. 4 wars were fought between British and the Mysore rulers. The 4th war was fought in the year 1799 AD. The 4th war was fought in 1799 AD. In this war, the ruler of Mysore was defeated and killed, and thereafterwards the Mysore territory was taken over by the British. The second important territory to be conquered by the British in India happened to be Mysore. And immediately the British turned their attention to the Maratha kingdom. For the simple reason, the point is, one territory after the other, the British began attacking and occupying. So the third territory to be conquered by the British happened to be Marathas. So the Marathas were also growing, they were also becoming powerful, and therefore the British fought 3 wars against the Marathas. In the third Maratha war, that was fought in the year 1817 to 1819, let me repeat, altogether 3 wars were fought between the Marathas and the British. The third Maratha war was fought between 1817 to 1819. In that war, the Maratha rulers were defeated and the Maratha territory was occupied by the British. Not the whole territory, mind you. So this saffron color is the entire territory that was under the control of the Marathas, but only this Maratha kingdom comprised of 5 ruling families. This entire Maratha empire was under the control of 5 ruling families. One we have is the Peshwas, who ruled from Pune. Let me repeat, just a minute. Just a minute. So basically, the saffron color marked territory is the Maratha Empire, but this entire Maratha Empire was not under the control of one family. This Maratha Empire was under the control of 5 ruling families. The 5 families. That's the point. First family is the Peshwas, who ruled from Pune. The second family is the Gaikwads. Got the point. The third family is Sindhyas, who ruled from Gwalior. Then fourth family is we have Bhonsles, who ruled from Nagpur, and fifth family is we have the Holkars, who were basically ruling from Indore. Got my point? So basically, the Maratha Empire was under the control of 5 families who were ruling different parts of the Maratha Empire. So in the wars, the British basically fought wars with the Peshwas. The British fought wars with the Peshwas. So they fought altogether 3 wars with the Peshwas. So in the third war, the Peshwas were defeated. The third war was fought between 1817 1819. In the third war, the Peshwas were defeated. Basically, the Peshwas had their rule in this region. In this region, the Peshwas had their rule. So in the third war, the Peshwas were defeated and their entire territory was occupied by the British. So the third important territory to be occupied by the British happened to be a part of the Maratha Empire. Then the British turned their attention to Northwest India, this region. The British then turned their attention to Northwest region, this region. This is basically the Northwest region. Why? Because the point is the Russians were also expanding. The Russians were trying to bring the Russians by this time brought Central Asia under their control, and the British Russians were trying to expand their influence even into the Indian subcontinent. And that made the British threatened. So therefore, the British in turn started declaring wars against the kingdoms of Northwest India and began occupying them. Let me repeat this point once again. Russians were expanding. Russia by this time, that is by 1840 itself, Russia had established its influence over whole of Central Asia. Russia was also trying to extend its influence even over Afghanistan. And the British feared that the Russians might even try to extend their influence even into India. And to prevent that from happening, the British started declaring wars on the kingdoms located in Northwest India and started occupying them. So in 1843, the British fought a war with the ruler of Sindh, this region, this red mark region. In 1843, the British declared a war against the ruler of Sindh, defeated him and occupied the Sindh region. And in 1849, the British declared a war against the ruler of this Sikh kingdom. This basically the Mizil or Sikh region. So basically in 1849, the British declared a war against the Sikh ruler, defeated him and occupied the Sikh territory as well. Got the point? So the whole point which I'm trying to convey is, till 1849, the British roughly conquered a majority part of India, and mostly between 1813 to 1823. Let me just go through this one. So take a look at the expansion. How did the expansion of the company's rule began? I just discussed about Mysore. So after Bengal, Mysore was occupied. Then thereafterwards, I just discussed with you the second, Marathas. Marathas were also occupied. Got the point? Third, we have a Governor General by name Lord Hastings, who was the Governor General for about 10 years, 1813 to 1823. So during Lord Hastings' time period, close to 350 small kingdoms were occupied by the British. During the time period of Lord Hastings, close to 350 small sized kingdoms were occupied by the British. Most of these kingdoms were located in central India. Mostly located in central India. So we don't have to exactly discuss which all kingdoms this man, that is Lord Hastings, occupied. But the whole point is, between 1813 to 1823, many kingdoms, small kingdoms of Central India were occupied by Lord Hastings, that is the British Governor General. Then Sindh I just discussed with you. So basically the basic reason behind occupying Sindh and Punjab was threat coming from the expanding Russians. The threat coming from the expanding Russia. Sindh was occupied in 1843. Punjab was also occupied in 1849. At the point. And that's how the British by 1849 established their hold over a large part of India. They established their hold over a very large part of India. That's the point. So the point is, the British followed two strategies to extend their influence over the Indian territories. You understand this point? The British followed by and large two strategies to extend their influence over Indian territories. One, by fighting wars. They try to conquer the territories and bring those territories under their direct control, as has happened, as the way just we discussed. All of what we discussed so far is basically the first strategy. So basically the British followed two types of strategies to extend their influence over the Indian territories. One, fighting wars. Example, what all we just discussed are examples of the first strategy. Second, the British implemented various schemes. The British implemented numerous imperial schemes. The British implemented various imperial schemes to extend their influence over the Indian territories. That's the point. They did not fight wars, but they came up with numerous imperial schemes or imperial policies with the objective of establishing their influence or their control over the Indian territories. First part I have just discussed with you. Come to the second part. So second part, I will be taking up the discussion on these imperial schemes. I will be taking up in some other class. But kindly remember, the British had followed altogether three different policies with the objective of establishing their control over the princely states. Got the point? These are the three policies: subsidiary alliance, doctrine of lapse, and doctrine of misgovernance. So take a look at this map of India. So by about 1857, leaving the green territories, the territories marked in other colors all came under the direct control of the British. So for example, say Assam, this Bihar, Bengal. Got the point? So the territories marked in all other colors except for this green, they came under these territories. Basically, these are the territories. This territory. I just told you Sindh, 1843, 1849 Punjab was occupied. Then The Maharashtra region I told you here, this region was also occupied. I told you central Indian provinces. I told you 350 small kingdoms were occupied. This entire region was occupied. Then Mysore was occupied. This region, Mysore kingdom was occupied. So Karnataka was occupied. Travancore, that is in Kerala, was occupied. This entire coastal Andhra Pradesh was occupied. Got your point. So this big territory came under the control of British. But mind you, these light green marked regions, they still, I'm sorry, they still remained under the control of various rulers, the Indian rulers. Of course, the British established their indirect control over these princely states through a variety of instruments. These are the one, that is a doctrine of a subsidiary alliance, doctrine of lapse, and doctrine of misgovernance. So in some other class, I will be taking up discussion on these three topics. Fine. Is this clear to you all? Any doubts, anyone? If you have any doubts, you may start raising questions. Have you all understood this topic? I will be, Sri Lakshmi, I will be posting the PDF in today definitely. Any doubt, anyone? Fine. So in some other class, in the next class, I will be taking up discussion on these imperial schemes. Fine. Fine. So that's all for today. See you in the next class. But in case anyone, any doubt, you may, if you have doubts, you kindly put forward your doubts. I will try to solve, I will try to clarify all of your doubts. Fine. That's all for today. See you in the next class. So kindly ask your friends who are preparing for UPSC to join the class. That's your point. So you keep attending our sessions regularly. But in case you have any doubts, if you want me to discuss on any other topic, you may ask me to discuss them. I will, at an appropriate time, I will discuss those topics as well. That's your point. One, me discussing. Second, if you want me to discuss on any other topic, of course relating to history, that I will be doing. You can let me know those topics. That's the point. So that's all for today. See you in the next class.